he would have eaten enough to satisfy a regiment. The logistics of feeding him had become grotesque. Special chairs with built-in tables and restraints were constructed to hold him upright during his gluttonous marathons. Servants worked in shifts to supply food continuously, day and night. Records show that deliveries were made to the royal apartments at all hours, suggesting that Henry no longer observed the rhythm of meals. His eating had become a ceaseless process, unbroken by sleep or rest. Yet even more dreadful than the physical decay was the king's mental collapse. His thoughts revolved entirely around food. He would sit for hours, staring at empty plates as though hallucinating the feasts of his imagination. Courtiers reported hearing him describe in vivid detail elaborate banquets that did not exist, then raging when they failed to appear. His world had contracted to one obsession: eating. As his mind deteriorated, so did his fear. Henry became convinced that his enemies were plotting not only to poison him, but to steal his provisions. Guards were stationed in his bedchamber to watch over his food stores through the night. The king would awaken repeatedly to count his supplies, flying into panic if a single dish seemed missing. The atmosphere of the court grew unbearable. Those who had once competed for the privilege of dining with the king now invented excuses to avoid him. The reek of infection, the sight of his trembling hands, the obscene noises of his eating, all created a living nightmare for anyone forced into his presence. Catherine Parr, Henry's sixth and final wife, bore the ordeal in silence. She could only pray as her husband devoured himself to death, knowing any attempt to intervene might cost her life. Records suggest that she spent long hours in her private chapel, not praying for Henry's recovery, but for mercy, for his soul, and for her own. The economic toll of Henry's unrestrained appetite during his final years was nothing short of disastrous. Feeding the king and his court consumed nearly half of the royal treasury. Vast tracts of English countryside were stripped bare of livestock to satisfy his hunger, and the relentless demand for meat left peasants destitute. Entire regions faced famine, as local farmers were forced to surrender animals that would have sustained their families through winter. By early 1547, Henry's body was failing under the accumulated punishment of nearly 40 years of gluttony. Those few physicians who remained in his service kept detailed notes that read like a catalogue of modern diseases. His heart, strained and swollen, struggled to pump blood through layers of fat. His liver, poisoned by decades of ale and wine, had turned yellow and hardened. His breathing had grown shallow and ragged, compressed by the crushing weight of his chest. At times he would doze off mid-meal, his enormous head falling into his plate, only to wake choking on his own food. He had become a prisoner of his own body, unable to stand, barely able to speak, yet still commanding with the imperious will of a king. His attendants, terrified of his wrath, obeyed every command, even those that